Shalom and welcome. You're listening to Temple Talk from the Temple Institute in Jerusalem, Israel. Rabbi Chaim Richman here with Yitzchak Reuven. Today, the third day of the month of Tevet, 5776. It's December 15th, 2015. This week, Parshat Vayigash, the penultimate Torah portion of the book of Bereshit. And Hanukkah now behind us. This week we concluded the 8-day festival of Hanukkah, and on Zot Hanukkah, which is the term used to describe the last day of Hanukkah, comes from the verse in Parshat Naso regarding the dedication of the princes in the tabernacle. On the last day of Hanukkah, the very day in which, according to tradition, all of the power and majesty of the festival, the lights, is all concentrated and refracted and amplified on that day. It's a day that's specially propitious for prayer. On that day, the Temple Institute, together with some other temple organizations, held what's become our annual ceremony of symbolically kindling the menorah of the temple in terms of a practice run with real Kohanim dressed in real priestly garments, and we had a very well-attended event in which we practiced lighting the temple menorah, practiced parts of the service of the altar, the Tamid daily service, as well as we got to hear some debut singing from young Levites in terms of the reconstruction of the Levitical choir. And now we have already begun the month of Tevet, and Hanukkah is very singular in that it is the only holiday observed on the Hebrew calendar which begins in one month and carries over into the next month. And that is all extremely significant, since this period of winter is is characterized by very long nights, very dark nights. And of course, that's really the whole idea of Hanukkah, isn't it? Bringing the lights of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, the light of the menorah, back into the world, standing up for Hashem's house, for his honor. And Tevet is a very strange kind of phenomena, I think, in that really the most famous, the most well-known aspect of the month of Tevet is so diametrically the opposite of the joy of Hanukkah, because it's also temple-related, but it is regarding the other end of the spectrum, regarding the destruction of the temple, because on the 10th day of Tevet, which is observed actually a week from today, on the 22nd of December, the 10th of Tevet is a fast day which commemorates the siege in the time of the first temple that was exercised by Nebuchadnezzar, and that led to the beginning of the end of the first temple, the destruction of the first temple. The siege around Jerusalem, which began on the 10th day of Tevet. The truth is that there are 3 days in succession next week. That once upon a time, when people were of stronger constitution, the Jewish people actually fasted 3 days consecutively, because the 8th and the 9th are also days of, shall we say, misfortune, or days that are marked by a certain degree of communal mourning. One of those days is the days in which Ezra and Nehemiah passed away. That signaled a dearth of leadership. And the other is the day that the Torah was translated under the orders of King Ptolemy, translated into Greek, and all the confusion and chaos and misunderstanding that came into the world as a result of that. So this is an interesting theme, again, that Hanukkah began in Kislev, which is all about dreaming and all about the realization of dreams. And it ends in Tevet, in the first week of Tevet, which is a month that, again, is completely fixated on the temple, but it is marked by a fast day that's that commemorates and observes and recalls mourning for the temple. But yet there's an idea that our mystic sages teach us that the beginning is the main thing. So the beginning of the month of Tevet is already rooted in the deep light of Hanukkah. And I'd like to go a little further than we usually do and mention another aspect of the month of Tevet that we are taught, which is that unlike the previous month of Kislev, which was really about the realization of dreams, which is so much actualized by the victory of the Chashmonaim. And of course, again, all this is on the background of Yosef's dreams that we're reading during this time, the Torah portions. Tevet has a certain theme, according to the great mystic sages. The theme of Tevet is to work on uprooting negative forces in our lives that might keep us from actualizing our dreams. And specifically, there's an idea in the month of Tevet that we should all address and work on our attribute of anger. Tevet is about the opportunity to rectify, purify negative emotions, particularly anger and jealousy. And therefore, and again, look at Yosef and his brothers, right? So therefore, we hopefully, if we want to go along that path, down that path, because there is an idea that along the way that a person wants to go, Hashem directs him, right? If a person wants opportunities to purify, then God gives us ample opportunities to purify ourselves. If a person is looking for trouble, God says, here you go, I have it right here for you. So hopefully we will be given opportunities during this month of Tevet for overcoming feelings of anger and jealousy, and all that those feelings show us is how much we need to reconnect ourselves with God, and how grateful we have to be for what we have. So we're going all the time through a wrenching process of self-knowledge. That's what life is all about. It must have been that way for Yosef and his brothers. It was obviously an odyssey into the self, into self-knowledge, into realization, recognition, reconciliation, and everything that we're talking about here in this bridge between Kislev, which is about dreams and their potential and their realization, and Tevet, which is about overcoming the things that hold us back from those things, which is like our own negative emotions and feelings. All those things so much come to a head in this Torah portion of Vayigash. And it really has every element of a major production, like of a major work. You have the whole theme, which Yitzchak, as you've written about since the beginning of the Torah, this theme that's been working itself out of brotherly angst and jealousy. It comes to such a head now, and the drama and the pathos of the reconciliation of Yosef and his brothers is unparalleled. But what does it all mean, really, on the level of the entire nation of Israel for all time? That's really the question that I always have when I read this Torah portion. I mean, it's very emotive, it's very overpowering, it's very inspiring to read about the moment when Yosef made himself known to his brothers. It's even more powerful when we study the traditions and the oral tradition of what our sages teach us is the background of that moment and everything that happened then, and Yaakov's meeting with his son again after so many years. But there's so much more to it. And one thing that I'm having, issues wrapping my mind about, Yitzchak, Reuven, is the fact that ultimately, like so many other aspects of Torah, the whole thing is such a setup, really, so divinely orchestrated, because ever since God told Abraham at the patriarch of all of us, at the covenant between the portions, know for a surety that your descendants are going to be enslaved. Ever since that moment, that had to be fulfilled. And now the stage is being set for that to happen. And in a very kind way, in a very compassionate way, in a very kind of sugar-coated way. And some commentators actually use that expression, that it was kind of like sugar-coated. Hashem brought Yaakov down to Egypt. And he brought him down in a way that was really very compassionate, because he got to be with Yosef again. But we needed to be there because we needed to set the stage for what is about to happen now, which is parallel to the hibernative quality on a deep level of the coming period of time now in this deep, dark part of the winter. And that is going through this smelting furnace, as the sages refer to it, of the Egyptian experience, so that we can come out stronger and liberated and ready to receive Torah. So all of these things are so connected. And as I mentioned last week, one of the things that we see in such a powerful way from these Torah portions is how everything is connected. And here we are now, reading about the reconciliation of the brothers, and fast forward to our time today, and goodness, this is the biggest issue that we have. The biggest issue that we have as a people is recognizing each other, appreciating the positive aspects that each of us have, working on the negative traits that we have about each other. So it all fits together perfectly with the bridge between Kislev and Tevet, and between the past and the future. I mean, we're now, as it were, going to witness the descent of Israel into the darkness of Egypt.
The darkness brought on by a lack of brotherly love, brought on by a lack of peace between the brothers. That is the opposite of our purpose here. No, I mean.
But you realize what you just said is such a powerful idea, that if you write all this out on a piece of paper and analyze how we got to Egypt in the first place, it all happened because of the enmity between Yosef and his brothers. There must be a lesson there. I mean, yes, it had already been preordained, as it were, at the covenant between the portions, that we had to go through what we have to go through in Egypt. Had to come out about one way or another. But it's an amazing thing to reflect upon, that the entire Egyptian exile came about as a result of Yosef being sold down the river by his brothers. And again, but before it all fell apart, Yosef rose to a pinnacle in which he was responsible for saving the entire nation of Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and beyond Egypt.
How much of this parallels contemporary Jewish history, and specifically the history of the Jewish people in the United States of America, yet remains to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
But it's quite a tantalizing idea.
And there are commentators who say that the actual subtext of the disagreement, of the enmity between Yosef and his brothers, was how they knew they were the generation that was going to go down to Egypt, and how are they going to affect that and make that happen. And they couldn't agree on it, and it was the lack of agreement that brought them down to Egypt. But my question for you, Rabbi, is, I don't know if it's a question, but living in we can all get together and live together, as brothers, but when we're living with the imperative, God's imperative for us, our history on this earth, that's tough to live with. The quote, chosen people, et cetera, but living as a nation, united, knowing that God has plans for us, I think that's what we have to learn how to deal with better, because that's what starts to, erode our relations with one another. You getting
Look,
it?
I don't know if I am getting it or not. You might be referring to the fact that, because I know you've been studying this. I mean, the fact is, the verses cannot be interpreted according to their simplest interpretation, because the brothers, they were not a band of ruthless highwaymen that lay in wait for their brother and said, let's do away with him. It's not like that at all. Their issue was how to bring God's light into this world, and how to serve Him best, and how to establish the structure of the future generations, and on what basis is the covenant that we're going to be having with God. And again, this is the deepest of the deep. There are many, many layers of meaning here of what that was all going on. So, I mean, I would like to believe today as well that when we look at the tears in the body of Israel and the things that separate us from recognizing each other, like the moment of Yosef and his brother's reconciliation, I'd like to think that on some level, maybe intuitively, maybe on the highest level of intuitive wisdom, it's also over a very altruistic, sincere place of wanting to do the right thing, because that's in the depths of the Jewish soul. There is that desire for God. We don't always understand it, and if we don't know how to plug it into reality, then it can go in all kinds of crazy directions. I think that even when you look at things that are very upsetting about contemporary society, especially in Israel, and the conflict, with the left and people that seem to be so devoted to dismantling everything that we believe in, they also believe that they're doing the right thing. So if Tevet is about overcoming enmity and jealousy and anger, maybe I need to work on my attitude about people like President Reuven, who I think just absolutely desecrated the name of the Jewish people in the state of Israel by cringing in Obama's presence, and by saying things that were an absolute liability and embarrassment to the state of Israel, and by completely overstepping his bounds as a figurehead president by suggesting again that Israel should do more for peace and set the stage for Obama to be able to pressure Netanyahu for more concessions and more sacrifices and more dismantling. So, but yeah, Reuven Rivlin's a great guy, and I guess he really meant well, but he just totally wimped out. And then he called Obama the shamash, who's been lighting the candles for 7 years. And oh my goodness, I really need to work on myself when I study about this deep stuff about Tevet, because I'm starting to develop. There's some bile coming up in my throat here.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the archetypal recurring cycle of Yosef and his brothers, the two different opposing forces as to how to bring about redemption, and we are the ones that are caught in the middle.
Well, anyway, that's all cheerful.
So, in the meantime, the hypocrisy continues, the terror continues. Yesterday here in Jerusalem, there was a terror attack not far from where we sit at this moment, at a bus stop right at the entrance to. It's not at the entrance to town. It's opposite. It's right opposite the central bus station, and there were a number of wounded. Seriously wounded was a toddler and his mother, and the last that I read last night, the toddler was in surgery, and there was a danger of the baby's leg needing to be amputated.
I think I've heard that it was amputated.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that even.
Yeah. He's out of danger, but his foot was amputated.
And here again, last week we spoke about the whole ridiculous controversy that's going on in America about gun control, and how it's not guns that kill people, it's people who kill people. And if people had guns, then they could stop the people. So here in Israel, in Jerusalem, yesterday's terror attack, the terrorist who rammed his car into a crowded bus stop and then and was found to have a huge axe in his car, then started to emerge from the car with a knife. Terrorist was put down, killed by civilians that were armed. Today, that was yesterday. Today, as a matter of fact, an hour or so ago, before we came to Mike for today's program, and all this, I didn't even know it until after it happened. We just read online in a number of sources, including Israel National News, that a female terrorist was apprehended outside the door of our office in the middle of downtown Jerusalem on our street. She actually aroused the suspicion of a border police woman by her furtive gait, I guess. I don't know. She was stopped and searched, and it was revealed that she had a large screwdriver. Now, I suppose Ban Ki-moon and others might really think that we overreact and get upset. I mean, okay, she wasn't killed, she was apprehended. But why would we be upset? I mean, people are allowed to walk around with screwdrivers, and they can go to Radio Shack, and they can have all sorts of things in their purses. But upon questioning this young Muslim lady outside our door here, outside the Temple Institute's office door in downtown Jerusalem, she admitted that she was walking down the street, our street, looking for Jews to stab with her screwdriver. So there. But speaking of Ban Ki-moon, speaking of yesterday's attack, and speaking of today's thwarted attack, and how many times this happens every single week, that Jews are attacked with stabbing, with gunshots, with attempted runovers, and unfortunately many of these attacks are somewhat successful. But what happened now again is that I'm reading a headline: UN bashes Israel for excessive force against terrorists. The UN voiced deep concern Tuesday over an unacceptable wave of Palestinian Arab terrorists attacking Israelis, but also slammed Israeli authorities against excessive use of force in trying to defend civilians from certain death. We continue to be gravely concerned at the unrelenting violence in the occupied Palestinian territory and in Israel. Cecile Poulali, spokesman for the UN Human Rights Office, told reporters, and of course calling on both Israelis and Palestinians. But what she stressed is that since October 1st, 117 Palestinian Arabs have died in the almost daily Arab terror attacks, a figure that consists of terrorists shot in the act or rioting. There's the music. I'm getting away with myself. I'm so upset about this business with the UN. Don't go anywhere. I'm sure the UN's not going anywhere. We'll be right back. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven, and with me, Rabbi Chaim Richman, Temple Institute. Today is the third day of the month of Tevet, 5776, the 15th day of December, 2015. And Rabbi, before we get back to your discussion about Ban Ki-moon, the UN, excessive force, etc., yada, 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 I just want to say that we are currently involved in a major overhaul on our website, and it has been offline for the past 2 days, and we hope to have it back up very, very soon. If you would like to get in contact with us, you may at this email address, info-temple-institute, one word, info-temple-institute@gmail.com. If you're anxious to make a donation, you may go to our Facebook page, and there is an app on the page to make a donation, either via PayPal or credit card through PayPal. Again, we hope to have the site back up and running very, very soon. We apologize for the inconvenience, and pay no attention to that nasty message that you might get if you do try to go to our site that says, "Ooh, it might be happening this." You know, the standard text that your browser puts out can be a little over the top. But we're just involved in a technical overhaul, and our web expert server, etc., is working on it night and day in order to get it back up ASAP. Rabbi.
So please be patient with us, and we do apologize for any inconvenience, and don't give up. Just check back to www.templeinstitute.org frequently, because within a day or two, everything should be resolved. I was saying that the UN is very upset and voicing deep concern over the disproportionate amount of casualties in what they call the unacceptable wave. And they're pointing out that, for example, in the H2 area of Hebron alone, 16 of the 17 Palestinian terrorists involved in attacks against Israelis since October 1st were shot dead. So they again voice deep concern over reports of excessive use of force by Israeli forces. And she said, she insisted that, and I quote, all instances of the use of force resulting in death or injury by law enforcement officers should be the subject of prompt, independent, and impartial investigations. And again, all of this is just so absolutely ludicrous. You know, the notion or the thought, I mean, we mentioned last week about Sweden, how the Foreign Ministry of Sweden says stabbings are not even considered to be terrorism according to the book of definitions of international terminology of terrorism. So the fact that outside our door an hour ago a woman was looking for Jews to stab, that's not terrorism. And driving into a baby at a bus stop is not terrorism. And we should just calm down. I mean, we should practice what we preach. Here I spent the first half of the show talking about how Tevet is a time for working on your anger, your negative emotions, grab hold of yourself, breathe deeply, you're being challenged here, you're being tested. So I should say, oh, this is how Israel should react, like, whoa, is this my fault? Is this wrong? Is this my fault? Should I be more introspective here about the person? I got to tell you something. My son, at the moment, my baby boy, is in harm's way, right? He's in Hebron, and he's manning a roadblock at a very volatile spot where there's been a lot of trouble. Hashem should protect him, amen. And he's in an officer's course, but they took them because they're like accessible. You know, the guys in the officer course are already advanced in their training, and they're not attached to a different gizra, a different section. You know, so therefore they're you know, kind of like at hand. Anyway, so there he is. So we're very concerned because a lot of things have been going on exactly in that spot. In fact, or just over Shabbat. I just turned on the news after Shabbat and I saw that there was an attempted stabbing right there. So on the phone, when I was speaking to him, I said, listen, you do me a favor. Don't let anyone get near you. Like 5 meters. I just said off the top of my head, like, don't let any Arab near you on any side of you for 5 meters. And he said to me, actually, Abba, the IDF published a brochure that they gave us, and they say 8 meters. They actually made a calculation of the length of an arm. I don't know which amma they use, you know. The length of an arm holding a projectile, and how long it would take for the person to run towards you. And they came to the conclusion that you need to have a buffer of 8 meters.
Wow, that's good to know.
The point is that there's only one goal that all of these terrorists have, and that is to utterly destroy the name of Israel, the existence of Israel from the world. Nothing has changed from the Hanukkah story. The spiritual, physical, it's all the same struggle, and everything that we do here constantly, every moment, is a sanctification of Hashem's name. Every step that we take, every Jew that lives in this land is a target because they are Jews reclaiming this land. So whether you are in the IDF or you are an old lady going to the shuk to buy your tomatoes, we are all in this together. This is the nation of Israel, and it's so not surprising for the UN and for all these countries to say, what are you doing? Why are you killing these people? You're overreacting. You're overreacting. It's disproportionate. Why are there so many being killed? Well, because we care about each other, because we're protecting each other, because we're armed, because we have wonderful security forces, and because we would prefer not dying. I'm sorry, we would prefer not dying.
You mentioned before, Rabbi, you know, Tevet and controlling your anger, etc., and you also mentioned the Parashah, Yosef and his brothers and the reconciliation. But right before the reconciliation, and I think this is very relevant, which is why I'm bringing it up, at the very beginning of Parashat Vayigash, right before the reconciliation, when Yosef was said, you know, I'm taking Benjamin, and you guys can go back. And Yehuda, who did not know that this was his brother Yosef standing before him, but he did know that he was the second most powerful man in the world's only superpower at that time. He was not going to take this lying down. And it's very clear from the language in the Torah itself that his response was shrill, to say the least. And he was, what do they say? He stood on his hind leg. How do you say that expression? He was
in his capacity of the
Sir,
REA.
right? He said, "Sir, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I swore to my father, it's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen." And the Midrash expands upon that and says that they were ready to go to war. This was it. These 10 brothers were ready to go to war against, and this is Hanukkah all over again before it actually happened. They were ready to go to war about not separating their brother Binyamin from their father. They had done this once before. They're not going to let it happen again. And the Midrash talks about Yehuda's voice. Help me with this. His voice was so loud when he spoke to Yosef.
We made a film about this one year.
It
was heard all over the world. And his teeth fell out. And Chushim ben Dan, right? The deaf one, he heard it, and he came running.
He came running. Within a second, he was there from Canaan. He was there to
we
go
called
to war.
this in one of the films that we made a couple of years ago. We called this, I think, the Battle of the Titans, or something, based on an old movie poster.
We had good times.
Yosef and Yehuda were ready to kill each other over this.
Over the fact that someone was threatening a member of the family, someone was threatening a member of the nation of Israel, and that was not about to happen. And I don't know if there were any Ban Ki-moons at the time, but he wasn't.
Yitzchak, how is it that they didn't recognize him? It's just so crazy. It's so crazy, And everybody knows the famous teaching that Rashi cites, that when he left them, he was a young boy, now he had a beard. It doesn't really work for me. I mean, I meet kids that I meet guys that I was in school with that I haven't seen for over 40 years, and now we're all almost 60, and they have beards, and I would recognize them in a second. And then there's the old psychological idea that, well, if you're not expecting to see someone, you don't see them. But you know what? This is so intriguing and it's so compelling what it really means. And speaking of the Midrash, how as they're going down for the count and this confrontation, and Yosef is saying to them, you know what? I bought Yosef ben Yaakov. I bought him. He's right here with me, like Marshall McLuhan. He's right here with me. And then he says to them. Then he says, "I'm going to call him and I'm going to bring him out." This is literally what the Midrash says. It's just like that scene from Annie Hall with Marshall. Well, I just happen to have Marshall McLuhan right here. According to Midrash, he says to them,
Yosef says to them.
Yeah, he says to them, I actually purchased him. Yeah, when he was sold, and he's right here in my household. And then he starts calling him in front. He says, Yosef ben Yaakov, and they look in all four corners of the room at the doors for him to come out.
Midrash.
For him to come out. And then they're looking at him, and then he says, "It's me."
Wow.
And that moment of utter, total inner turmoil that they experienced in realizing that it was him. What does that mean for us today? In the maelstrom and the depths, the churling depths of our relationships with each other, and our lack of appreciation and recognition of each other, and the forces, redemptive and messianic and otherwise, within each of us that we're not connecting with. So it's really amazing. And I'm always very driven every year to go deeper and deeper into the connection between these Torah portions of Vayeshev, Miketz, and Vayigash, these Torah portions, and Hanukkah. And everybody knows there's a lot of hidden meaning, and because these Torah portions always fall out during Hanukkah, and it's not for no reason. There's a confluence, even something as simple as the 7 ears of corn, and the expression of that the Torah uses there to describe the dream, how they were ole b'kaneh echad, is reminiscent of the menorah. Right. But all the different ideas of of why we read about Yosef over Hanukkah. And suddenly it hit me the other night at about 3:32 in the morning. Suddenly it hit me. The most simple and yet profound realization that maybe everybody knows this, maybe it's simple to you, maybe you read it in a book, I don't know. Suddenly it just hit me in a way that I never understood before. The simplest thing is that just like they found the one cruse of oil that remained pure, Yosef remained pure in Egypt. And they discovered him, and he was unchanged. He was exactly the same.
He looked different.
He did, but he remained pure. He remained unsullied. And you know what? That is also on the collective Klali level, also really the secret of the Jewish survival. All of the nation of Israel is that one cruse of oil that is totally unsullied. In the deepest level of the soul roots, you know what? We made it. We made it through everything. And that's exactly what the subjugation of the nations that we feel is so strong, that why the nations are coming against Israel to blot that light out, because they can't handle the fact that we are standing up for the honor of God in the world. That's exactly what it's all about. Nothing has changed at all. And all those decrees that were made by Yavan, by the Greek invaders, the story of Hanukkah, was all about subjugating the spirits and destroying the spiritual potential of the people of Israel. And that's what this is all about today as well. Nothing has changed. And that's why the challenges that we face now over every grain of land, of this land, and every house and every kindergarten that's built, that the world has an outcry about how we could possibly be building settlements, and how from the UN to the EU to John Kerry, how they're all talking about how settlements are the problem, and settlements show that Israel is duplicit, and Israel isn't serious about peace and all this kind of thing, because we are building homes for Jewish people in the land of Israel that belongs to no one else but the Jewish people. And literally nothing has changed, just as they came to say, you know, this is not your home and you have no portion in the God of Israel. Everything that we learn about the story of Hanukkah, that's what they're doing now. That's what the UN is doing. That's what America is doing. America is basically saying to us, you have no portion in the God of Israel. And that's exactly what we're fighting against.
By the way, the major battles fought in the war of the Maccabees against the Greek invaders were fought in areas that are over the Green Line, in areas that the world wants Israel to give away. And of course, they can light candles, and Obama can be the shamash, and they can turn Hanukkah into this puerile, generic gobbledygook, multicultural. We all want to live
Obama
together.
gave a speech, and he said it sounds like the plot of the new Star Wars movie. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
Oh, you missed
I
it.
was spared that one. But the fact of the
He
matter
said the story of
that
Hanukkah is reminiscent of the plot of the new Star Wars movie.
the fight of the Maccabees was the same fight we're fighting today for our land and nothing more. Our land and our religion, our freedom to practice it in our land. Something very ironic is going on right now. I'm not all the details, but I was reading about apparently Jordan has been not allowing Jews with kippot, religious Jews, religious appearing Jews, go to Jordan.
Right. So the ever popular tourist industry, Israelis for decades have been in love with Petra, and making trips, even when there was no peace and it was forbidden. Israelis made dangerous clandestine trips to the Nabatean city of Petra. And now we read that as part of a tourist package, Israelis go to Jordan all the time. But when Israelis come to the crossing, after having paid in advance for their hotel and their passage and their whole deal, they're told to either throw the kippah away or they can't come into Jordan.
Now that's horrible, right? That's horrible.
How come nobody's talking about that?
But,
How come nobody's talking about that?
But I wonder where they got that idea from. Jordan, Israel, we always talk about Jordan, Israel, but of course we talk about Jordan, Israel in the context of the Temple Mount. And guess whose idea it is to go along with such discrimination against religious Jews concerning the Temple Mount in Jordan. The Israeli government, the prime minister,
and Israel allows that. So Jordan probably says, "Well, listen, this is how we act on the Temple Mount, and you okay it?
Yeah,
we discriminate against the religious on the Temple Mount.
Oops, you're right, aren't you? Wow. We're gonna complain now that they won't allow religious Jews to Petra when we won't allow religious Jews to pray in a Temple Mount. Maybe they're afraid they're going to pray in Petra. I don't know. Then we can understand it. God forbid Jews should pray in Petra.
That might be the missing key right there.
Might be.
Yitzchak, when we return next week, it's actually the next Temple Talk is going to be the day that is observed as a fast day by all of Israel, the 10th of Tevet, which is the day of the siege around Jerusalem. But there are two important days that week that will be Sunday and Monday before the next Temple Talk. So I think we should talk about those 2 days a little bit.
Yeah, those days are the 8th, which is the anniversary of the translation of the...
That's Sunday the 20th.
Okay, translation of the Torah from Hebrew into Greek by 72 Torah sages. That was done, I believe, in Alexandria, in Egypt. It was done in Egypt by order of the king Ptolemy of Egypt. The 9th day, we'll get back to that in a minute. The 9th day was the day of passing of both Ezra and Nehemiah, who led Jews back from the Babylonian exile to Jerusalem and rebuilt the Holy Temple, the beginning of the Second Temple period, as we call it. But back to the Septuagint, the story goes, and in fact, from Tractate Megillah, it says, and I quote, It happened with King Ptolemy that he gathered 72 elders and gathered them in 72 houses and did not reveal to them the purpose for which he had gathered them. And he went in to visit each one of them, one by one, and he said to them, Write for me the Torah of Moshe, your teacher. The Holy One who was blessed gave to the heart of each of them, one by one, wisdom, and all of them arrived at a single understanding, meaning that each of these 72 sages was separated from the other. None of them knew what they were brought into these separate dwellings for, and then each one was told directly by Ptolemy to translate from Hebrew to Greek the Torah of Moshe, the 5 books, and each one did independent of the other. And of course, there were no smartphones or WhatsApps or anything back in those days. And each one, through Ruach HaKodesh, through divine inspiration, arrived at the precise same translation, including 15 verses throughout the Torah in which they actually made a change in order that the literal translation would not be misleading. And despite the fact that this was a remarkable display of the purity of the sages and the depth and power of Torah, and
not to mention the divine orchestration and providence that he.
Despite all that, it's still a day that is viewed dimly by Israel, because any translation of Torah from Hebrew to any other language, despite the fact that it does introduce Torah to a wider audience, is a loss, because it opens up Torah for possible misunderstandings and misinterpretations.
And it's even deeper than that, because the sages actually likened that day to the day that Israel worshipped the golden calf. They say it was as bad a disaster when the Torah was translated into Greek as when Israel worshipped the golden calf. Meaning that just as the whole idea of worshiping the golden calf was a total optical illusion, it was a total mistake, because there's nothing there whatsoever, so too you might have a translation of the Torah, but it's nothing but an illusion. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but on an even deeper level, I think what they're really telling us, what it really means, is that like the whole world now has that kind of total access. Everybody has everything, and they're going to tell us about God. They're going to tell us, no, this is what it means. No, that you're wrong. We'll tell you what you believe. We'll tell you what God is. We'll tell you how to live your life. And that's the disaster, because Israel is called upon to be a separate and holy nation, and we have our mandate and our legacy, and we have our covenant.
And the Hebrew language is not a language that can be translated into any other language and preserve the depth of the meaning of the Hebrew Torah. just impossible. And anybody who with a rudimentary knowledge of Hebrew will realize that. The 9th of Tevet, which is next Monday, was the day I said earlier, the passing of Ezra and Nehemiah, who brought the Jews back from Babylon to Jerusalem, and their task was threefold, which was to repair the walls of Jerusalem, to reestablish a political entity, and to rebuild the Holy Temple, of course, and renew the avodah, the divine service, and also to bring Israel back to Torah, because many people had lapsed in their observation. Here's the music. Temple Talk is finished for this week. Next week we'll be back on the 10th of Tevet, fast day, but we'll be here. Thank you for being with us. Temple Talk.